Hello and welcome to 1 minute and 43 seconds, a true Unsolved Mysteries podcast. Today I'm excited to announce the guest who is a great friend of mine. His name is Dave Ford, and together we are talking about sciencey mysteries. So if that's your thing, you'll really enjoy this episode. So without further ado, enjoy the show. To the computer.
Uh-oh.
What?
It gave me the warning that recording is in progress and asked me if I want to leave the meeting.
Oh, no. Do you want to?
No.
Oh, okay, good. Thanks. Well, welcome to episode, God, is this 15 now? Welcome to episode 15. My guest today is a very good friend of mine, and his name is Dave Ford. Dave,
Hello.
Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I figured since we were talking about scientific sort of mysteries, you would be perfect since you have a scientific-y background.
I do have a scientific background. I have my PhD in molecular biology and biochemistry, focused mostly on gene regulation. Although now I'm working for a company where I'm dealing with a lot of pharmaceutical stuff, so a lot of biology, medicine, health. Despite that fact, I'm interested in physics and chemistry, astronomy, so there's a lot we can talk about, but I won't claim that I'm an expert in many things, just somewhat interested in a few of them.
Well, that's a very impressive list of accomplishments. Congrats again on the PhD. So you recently just moved to Tampa, or maybe I should say you just recently moved to Florida. I don't know how specific you want me to get.
I get Tampa, yeah.
Tampa, okay. So what's that been like? How long has it been now? Like a couple weeks now, huh?
It's been like a long month, so it's been 3 weeks and some change, and it's still hectic because we moved from Chicago, basically, that area. And so it was cross country. It took a long time to get down here. All of our stuff, which we ordered a service to have any larger boxes or furniture be moved. So it was like 2 weeks later than we expected it, so we were sitting on nothing for a while, and it's still a work in progress. And it's really, really hot.
I was going to say, yeah, it's hot here too, but I mean, Florida, it's always hot.
Yeah, it tends to be hot. Yeah.
So, well, good.
It's good.
Settling in nicely.
Yeah.
And how's Odin?
He's well. I mean, he does not like the heat. He loves the snow. So
Odin is the dog.
He is, yeah, he's my dog. He is a mix, but he's probably part husky, part Shiba Inu. So he's that sort of like wolfy winter dog, and he hates the heat.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
You guys got some air conditioning though?
Well, we would die without it down here. Yeah, we have air conditioning.
Okay, good. So I sent you a list, or we decided on what we were going to talk about. So we have a few medical type mysteries, although there are some pretty strong theories for those. And then we were going to talk about space. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Which is a subject it's fascinated me. And I know you know a lot about it, or at least you more than I do anyway.
I mean, like a hobbyist education. Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll have to give me some resources because, you know what? I recently watched Jeff Bezos go into space.
Oh, you watched it happen?
Yeah. Did you see
Did he go into space, though? Did he go into space?
He went to like the Earth's atmosphere. He went to I don't know. I watched the video. He was up and back in literally like 8 minutes.
Yeah. I think
he exited the Earth's atmosphere. So I guess technically isn't that space?
I'm not sure if he completely exited the atmosphere. He was past a point where Like gravity certainly lessened and it achieved weightlessness, but that was basically it. There were still, I couldn't tell you the people who determined that where the atmosphere begins and ends and where the layers are, but I know there are multiple layers of radiation, and I think different gases, different ionic layers that he did not pass through. So.
Sweet.
Yeah, no, it's barely, and it's I have opinions about that, and a lot of other people have opinions about it, but it's just a glorified burning of a pile of money.
I was thinking that too. That's one expensive 8 minutes or whatever it was. I seriously think he was up and down in 8 minutes.
For what gain? What was gained from that?
I asked the exact same question. I said, "What's the point?" That was the first thing I said. I watched it go. I watched it take off and come back. I mean, it was cool. Just because it's interesting.
Super cool for him and his cowboy hat. But I mean, well, if you have a lot of money, you don't need a reason.
Right? Yeah, I did. But I asked the exact same question. I said, what was the point, number one? And how much did that cost? Because, I mean, I got loans to pay off.
Yeah, we should switch the topic of this podcast. Instead of science and medicine, this is the mysteries of capitalism now.
Yeah.
And how to seize the resources of production.
Megan featuring Dave, part 2. Yes. We'll mark that down for the books.
There we go.
All right. Well, I feel like space might be the one that, I don't know. I'm excited about, not that I'm not excited about the others, but I feel like I was going to save space for last.
Yeah, that's just the most open-ended, no pun intended really, but there's some places we can go with that. So let's save that for third.
Okay, let's save that for third. So the first one I was thinking about talking about is Gloria Ramirez, AKA the Toxic Lady, as she has been dubbed. I don't know if you had a chance to look into her at all, but I'm going to, tell the story anyway. So
yeah, let's hear it.
Okay. So 31-year-old, wow, she's 31. I just realized she's younger than I am.
Wow.
And she had cervical cancer. That's horrifying. Anyway. So 31-year-old Gloria Ramirez, this is February 19th in 1994. She was rushed to Riverside General Hospital in California around 8:15 at night. She was suffering from a rapid heartbeat. Basically, her heart was beating too fast for her body, and she was having trouble breathing. And she was also suffering from cervical cancer. She was conscious, but she was confused. And she was unable to answer any questions properly. So they gave her a bunch of medicine. What is VERSED?
Oh, the drug?
Yeah.
Midazolam, and a sedative.
Okay, yeah. So they gave her a sedative. They also gave her lorazepam, which is another sedative. I know that one because I've been prescribed that for the airplane before. Anyway, and then lidocaine and bretillium to ease her tachyarrhythmia. So for her heart.
Stabilize her heart, yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So she was not responding. So they decided to try and defibrillate. So it was at this point that nurses noticed like an oily sheen that was covering her body and a fruity, garlicky smell coming from her mouth. So a registered nurse by the name of Susan began drawing blood from Gloria's arm, and she noticed an ammonia-like smell coming from the syringe. She passed it to a medical student who noticed manila-colored particles floating in the blood. So already that's weird. Within moments of this happening, the nurse that drew her blood said that her face was burning, and then she fainted. They wheeled her out of the room, and then the medical assistant that she passed the syringe to said that she was nauseous, and she was also taken out of the room, and she passed out a few minutes later. A few seconds after that, another person that was in the room, a respiratory therapist, also fainted. It had been minutes since Gloria entered the emergency room, and already 3 people passed out, and nobody knew why.
So hence the term toxic lady.
Exactly, yeah. So eventually, because other people, I guess, these 3 had passed out, but other people were starting to feel really ill by being in her presence. So they ended up evacuating all of the emergency patients to the parking lot. While the infected staff removed their clothes and placed them in bags, a skeleton crew stayed behind to work on Gloria, who was still obviously in great distress. But unfortunately, 40 minutes after CPR, defibrillation, she was pronounced dead around 8:50. So she got there at 8:15 and she had died by 8:50. So they moved her body into an isolated room. And again, people that were in contact with her body started to be extremely ill. So they said that their skin was burning and they were throwing up. And overall, a total of 23 out of 37 staff members at the hospital that were there that night were ill, and 5 of those had to be admitted to the hospital. Here's another question. One of them spent 10 days in the hospital suffering from apnea. What is apnea? Because I know sleep apnea, but...
Well, there you go. So sleep apnea is where you suddenly stop breathing during sleep. And just normal apnea is when, for whatever reason, you're unable to unconsciously regulate your breathing in day-to-day life.
No, that doesn't sound good.
It's not great.
Somebody spent 10 days in the hospital suffering from apnea. The nurse's assistant that we were talking about earlier, she had to be in the intensive care unit with hepatitis and a vascular necrosis, which is, I don't know this, but I learned it from this, a disease where the bone tissue doesn't get enough blood and begins to die. So, and after she was released from the hospital, she had to spend months using crutches. What is the deal? Why did people start to feel sick, not just feel sick, but become really ill after being in contact with this woman? And they said that her cause of death, I didn't say this part, her cause of death was cardiac dysrhythmia resulting from kidney failure from her cervical cancer. Mm-hmm. So initial reactions before I go into the theories?
I mean, it's weird, right? On the face of it, because it's so different because it's not so much like how did she die, because that apparently, at least according to the record, is a solved mystery. Like her kidneys weren't working, her blood was toxic, and her heart couldn't function. But
what is the toxic? Her blood wasn't really. I mean, that wasn't cited as a reason that she died, though. Having toxic blood, right?
Well, that's what happens when you're in kidney failure.
Always? Your blood's toxic?
I mean, pretty much. The whole point of the kidneys is to filter out the toxins from the blood. And so what happens when they stop working is, you're obviously not going to pee very much, but then your blood is unable to get rid of the things that will poison you to death. And then your organs start failing.
Okay. Sorry. Didn't mean to divert there.
No, it's an important point to go over and actually maybe the key to this mystery.
Yes, it could be. Okay, so the first theory is mass hysteria. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but you know this about me. I have been known to
hysterical.
Faint. Well, that's a topic for another show. But no, I am very easily triggered by the sight of blood. I faint at the doctor when my blood is taken. Stuff like that. So anyway, that's a potential theory, mass hysteria.
Right. That just seems like the swamp gas explanation of like whenever aliens and UFOs are seen. It's just always the go-to if there's no other explanation. So it doesn't hold a lot of water. It's very hand wavy.
Yeah.
And especially these are like trained medical professionals. I'm sure some of them at least years of experience. And of course, everyone has their triggers. Everyone, something can hit them at a bad point, but hitting every one of these people at once, one after another, it seems very unlikely that it's just a case of mass hysteria.
That's a great point. Yeah, because I'm just me. I'm not a doctor. So the fact that I faint at the sight of blood is not really relevant to this
every day and night like they do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There were basically 2 scientists who concluded that the medical personnel that they interviewed 34 of the staff members. they concluded that it was mass hysteria, most likely triggered by the fruity, garlicky odor that was being emitted by her in her mouth. Of course, two of these people, the first ones that were in contact with her, deny this. And they filed a lawsuit, actually, stating, among other things, that mass hysteria does not cause vascular necrosis.
A lawsuit against the hospital?
Yeah, it doesn't say, unless I'm missing it somewhere, it doesn't say who she sued, but it says that she filed a lawsuit seeking $6 million in damages. So I assume that's the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just like what you said. So furthermore, in addition to the fact that she said mass hysteria does not cause a vascular necrosis, she also said 23 trained ER staff members are not unfamiliar with strange odors.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not likely that they would succumb to mass hysteria. So are you ready for the second theory?
Yeah, let's hear this one.
Okay, so the second theory is DMSO, which is
dimethyl sulfoxide.
Exactly. Thank you. So they found an abnormally large amount of dimethyl sulfone in Gloria's system. So they theorized that she'd been using dimethyl sulfoxide, this DMSO, as an anti-inflammatory. And it says here that it's one atom away from dimethyl sulfone.
Right.
So
it could possibly be metabolized from one to the other inside her body, maybe.
Yes. So they're saying if Gloria used this gel to cope with her cervical cancer pain, it could explain why there was like an oily sheen on her body and why there was a fruity garlicky smell emanating from her mouth. I don't know how that.
Yeah, the garlic. Does it smell like garlic? DMSO doesn't smell like garlic. I've smelled it before.
That's what this thing I'm reading says. Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, they theorize that could be the reason for the oily sheen.
So I just Googled really quick, and apparently a side effect of DMSO toxicity when you are exposed to too much of it and it hurts you is that there is a strong garlic flavor in your mouth, and your skin may also give off a garlic-like odor for a period of time.
Got it. That explains that then.
That's very weird.
Yeah, so they believe this was, so by the way, the people doing this investigation was the Forensic Science Center from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. So this lab, they believe that when the paramedics were giving Gloria oxygen, since she was having trouble breathing, it mixed with the DMSO, which is dimethyl sulfoxide, and it caused an oversaturation of the chemical. So it led them to think maybe it crystallized, which would explain those weird floating particles that were found in the syringe.
I mean, just something strange about that. I'm not a DMSO expert, but since I have a bit of a background in preclinical research, like testing things in animals, pharmaceuticals and stuff like that, DMSO is often used as it's a solvent. You use it to dissolve some chemicals, compounds, drugs for injection into animals, and it's used because at most concentrations it's non-toxic. It's good at dissolving things, but it won't hurt people. So for her to have it, following this train of thought, if she had so much DMSO that it caused this toxic effect that was affecting people around her, it would have to be an extraordinary amount.
I'm glad you said that, because this thing also says it might explain the particles in the syringe, but it does not explain how it says it's a harmless chemical. It doesn't explain how it infected these 23 people.
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
So they actually came up with another theory why that this was maybe possible. So they hypothesized that the electric shocks from the defibrillator caused the dimethyl sulfone to break down and mix with the naturally present sulfate compounds in Gloria's body, potentially generating dimethyl sulfate, a potent chemical that can cause paralysis, delirium, convulsions, and damage to the heart, liver, and kidneys, as well as the central nervous system.
That's
So-
interesting.
People disagree, though.
Yeah, I mean, just on the face of it, I don't know much about poisoning via dimethyl sulfate, but I would imagine you would need, even if it's very potent, you need a significant amount for there to be airborne or even tactile serious toxic effect that happens so fast to all these people. And I don't know if like a defibrillation shock caused enough chemical reaction to transform an amount of dimethyl sulfone to dimethyl sulfate for it to basically become a poisonous gas in the localized area. That seems like a stretch.
Yeah. And another issue that people have with the theory is that people that have previously been exposed to dimethyl sulfate didn't have the same symptoms that the hospital staff was experiencing.
Okay.
Also, they're saying the first symptom that would likely appear from this is crying, like you had been sprayed with tear gas, and it would have taken longer for it to have taken effect, or for the effects to be felt. And this happened, like I said, within minutes of when she arrived. So yeah, that theory is disputed, to say the least.
Yeah, so far none of these have been like really satisfying, which I guess is the point. Why it's a mystery.
Yes, exactly. So we have two more theories that are listed here. Number 3, some people say maybe it was the hospital having poor conditions. So in 1991, a poisonous gas was accidentally released from a sterilizer at the hospital, and 2 employees had to be hospitalized. And they found during an inspection in 1993, sewer gas was discovered in the ER. So Gloria's family believed that maybe she died because of the hospital's poor conditions. According to this theory, maybe the source of this toxic whatever was not from her body, but instead from something else in the hospital.
Mm-hmm. But
okay.
I mean, it's just sort of a general hand wavy kind of, oh, maybe there was something else. There's no actual evidence of there being something else at that time.
Yeah, and so they're saying that the coroner who performed her autopsy claimed that she had not died of natural causes, but later changed his opinion. An investigator from the coroner's office who was assigned to Gloria's case committed suicide a month after the investigation. Most alarmingly, the syringe which contained Gloria's blood was thrown away, quote, accidentally. So her family actually filed a malpractice suit against Riverside County, as they thought maybe the hospital's covering up what really happened. If the source of it was from something else, what difference does the syringe of her blood make?
Yeah, I mean,
unless
honestly,
it's for further testing, like for other things.
So usually when people try to put forward conspiracy theories, they throw a lot of things at you that are each of them a little weird and act as though all of them together make something very, very suspicious. But like, let's look at these things separately. So there was the coroner who committed suicide. There was the syringe that was thrown away. What else was there?
The coroner who performed her autopsy claimed she did not die of natural causes, but he later changed his opinion.
Okay. Do we know why he changed his opinion or what his opinion was changed to? Well, I assume natural causes was what it was changed to.
Right, yeah, because the original thing said she died as a result of, kidney failure and the fact that as a result of her cancer.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been able to find why or what it was beforehand.
Right.
If it went into more detail, I can look at that.
I mean, just my opinion on it. I mean, that stuff happens all the time, especially when it's a scrutinized medical report. And if the person's under pressure or if the higher ups want them to take another look at it and new evidence comes, like a number of things could make a coroner change their mind on a report. So that on its face without other surrounding evidence, I don't think is that weird. The syringe being thrown out, number one, this happens all the time. And number two, this was, they were evacuating the hospital, had a skeleton staff. There were very few people around. I think that's the least strange thing. in that list that syringe was lost. Of course it was. Why would you bother keeping it when you're trying, like we only have a skeleton crew and are trying to save this woman's life?
And you don't know what's going on yet. You don't necessarily think this is going to be something that's going to need to be investigated.
You're not keeping every syringe that you draw samples from patients. There's no reason for you to do that if you're not, you don't have the foresight for that. And the only, I guess, really weird thing is the person committing suicide, but we don't know what surrounded their life. We don't know what other aspects there were, unless it was under mysterious circumstances. I mean, people kill themselves all the time.
It says, according to this person's colleague, she had been under a lot of pressure, which was the reason that was given. I mean,
so yeah, maybe this had something to do with it, but the fact, like, just the strangeness and scrutiny and pressure from this situation could be a straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, instead of some sort of conspiracy hiding something.
True. All right, so there's a final theory that I have for you. Are you ready for that one?
Yes.
Okay, the final theory is methylamine. Methylamine?
Methylamine, okay.
So, yes. So in 1997, the New Times LA published a theory in which they claimed that Gloria's death and the illness of the 23 staff members were caused by methylamine, a precursor drug used in the production of methamphetamines. And it's, interestingly enough, known to have an ammonia-like smell. So according to this theory, members of the hospital staff would have to have been involved in drug making and drug smuggling. It's believed that following this theory, IV bags were used to smuggle methylamine, and that an infected one was accidentally given to Gloria, not only resulting in her death, but intoxication of the staff. So the most compelling evidence for this theory is what they found in Gloria's organs. They found an abnormal amount of nicotinamide, like nicotinamide.
Nicotinamide, yeah.
Nicotinamide. So they found an abnormal amount of nicotinamide in Gloria's system, which is a type of vitamin B3, which is commonly mixed with illegal drugs, so it adds to the euphoria. And so that is the last theory.
That seems like the worst of all of them. I mean, that's
if you didn't think
like,
they were all bad.
do you know where this came from? Like, was it like a tabloid rag, or was it like an actual professional investigator?
The New Times LA.
Oh, sounds like a tabloid rag.
Tabloid rag. It's a now defunct alternative weekly newspaper that was published in Los Angeles, 1996 to 2002. Oh, you're right. It's a tabloid.
Okay.
It came from a tabloid.
There's just
I don't buy it either.
Okay. Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, number one, I mean, just Googling while you were talking, the methylamine, which is used in methamphetamine creation, it's certainly toxic at relatively small levels, but its symptoms are nothing like what any of the people were suffering from. It's a respiratory thing when inhaled. And none of these people were exhibiting symptoms that would suggest that there was methylamine. And the fact that, what was the thing that they found in her organs, like high nicotinamide?
Correct.
Which apparently, I guess, is added to drugs to increase the high or something. You said something along those?
Apparently, yeah.
I mean, why that? I mean, I don't make meth, but I don't think if there was a bag with like high concentrations of methylamine, there's also a lot of nicotinamide in there. It sounds like they're two different ingredients at two different parts of the process. It's like saying that someone like obviously died from cookies because their like liver was full of chocolate chips. No, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't really buy that either. I mean, I was going to say a fun conspiracy theory to consider, but it's not. Yeah. It's, I don't know. I feel bad saying it's fun because this woman died, but
fair.
But
it's relatively fun.
So I think I covered pretty much everything. The theories. Yeah, that's pretty much all we have here. So is there anything that jumps out at you? I know you weren't crazy about all the theories, but
Yeah, I mean, I can see why mass hysteria was the first official diagnosis, or at least what they closed the book on it, because I mean, there's no easy answer. I think that the biggest thing is, like, right now, all of these operate under the assumption, except for the mass hysteria, everything else operates under the assumption that her symptoms and the effects on the hospital workers are linked and related. And of course, that's the obvious first assumption, because two weird things happen right next to each other. You assume, okay, they've got to be related. But all of her things, the fact that she had a weird smell, a weird sheen, had her blood looked weird, there's weird crystals forming in there, all of those, I think, can happen when you're in kidney failure.
mm-hmm.
Kidney failure causes a lot of different things, because it depends what sort of toxins and weird things are building up in your blood that should be filtered out that aren't. But definitely weird smells coming from your breath or body is very common in kidney failure. Changes in color, changes in, like, your sweat being weird is very common in kidney failure, because the weird chemicals are escaping somehow, since they're not being filtered by the urine. Occasionally there can be crystals or other things forming in the blood because it's not properly being filtered. Weird things are building up. So it's totally possible that all these things are being like, oh, she came in, like, and all these weird things are happening, then people got sick. A lot of those weird things could be because she was dying of kidney failure.
Yeah.
Plus, who knows, like was mentioned in so many of these theories, who knows how she was self-medicating and treating herself.
And actually, because it's funny you bring that up, Bert, it's good that you bring that up, because the whole thing with the, and I'm going to forget how to pronounce it again, the DMSO, the dimethyl sulfone.
So, the sulfone, not the sulfoxide, because DMSO normally means sulfoxide, and the sulfone is the possible derivative of DMSO.
Right. So the sulfoxide, they theorize she had been using that as an anti-inflammatory, but her family denies that she used that.
Okay.
So that's another interesting part of this, that they theorize this. You would think, the family would know if she was using it.
You'd think. I don't know if she lived alone or how much they were aware of things or how much she kept to herself. It's a black box.
Yeah. Now the mass hysteria thing's starting to make sense, but still, I mean, what do you make of the fact that one woman had the issue where she needed to walk on crutches because of the necrosis?
I mean, as unsatisfying as it is, coincidences happen. And so it's possible she had an underlying condition or some completely other thing happened to her. I think the situation that seems most likely to me is that Gloria Ramirez came in dying of kidney failure, with her heart unable to function because of the toxicity in her blood. And that kidney failure gave her a number of really weird symptoms. It was possible she was self-medicating with who knows what sort of chemicals that were not being flushed out of her body properly and giving a lot of weird effects. Weird smells, weird blood, a lot of strange things that were noted by the clinical staff. And separately from that, perhaps something else happened in that hospital, whether it was some sort of chemical leak or an unknown infectious agent or something like that, that just happened to coincide. Perhaps there's some causal relationship between the two of them, but I think what's most likely is that she came in, something else coincided, same time, and then the two were linked together. And just the fact that there was a hysteria, there was a reaction, that there was an evacuation, and that could have served just to make things worse.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we just solved it, Dave.
That's it. But just by saying something happened that we don't know.
Something occurred.
Something occurred.
Yeah, but it's sad. I cannot believe she was 31 years old. I've heard about this case before, and then just going back and reading that she was only 31 years old and she had cervical cancer.
When you hear
Sad.
cancer, you always assume older, but yeah, it happens to a lot of young people.
Yeah. All right. Well, should we move on to our next one, or do you have anything else you want to add?
I mean, that's everything that struck me about it. I mean, I wouldn't bet money on the fact that they're two separate things, but I think that is the most likely situation.
I mean, things happen all the time,
They do.
coincidences. So I think it's possible too.
Yeah.
And I don't understand the science. It's good to hear your perspective on the science portion of it, because if I was just, reading this with little scientific information or background I have, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. A chemicals reacting in her body. Done.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think I wish I was bringing something more medical, because I'm not medically trained. I don't have that experience. So I'm just familiar with some of the chemicals and other biology. But if you had a doctor here, I think they would give a much better perspective.
Okay, moving on. So the next one is about sleep hollow, which is the name of seemingly a medical disease that's causing people to sleep for days or weeks at a time. But this particular illness is only affecting people in the remote village of Kalachi in Kazakhstan in Eastern Europe. It was first reported in March 2013, and to date, it has affected 152 people. Kalachi is a rural city. So in 2014, it was reported that about a fifth of the population there had been affected with the sleep syndrome, otherwise referred to as sleep hollow disease. Nowhere else on Earth is there a similar phenomenon. The first person to fall ill was a middle-aged woman. She was working at a market when she suddenly became overcome with intense drowsiness. 4 days later, she woke up in a hospital where she was told she had a stroke. But shortly after this, there were several others that fell victim to this sleeping sickness. And one time, 5 women actually fell ill at one time. There was one of these people that happened to be a child that saw hallucinations. And this is a funny part. So there was even an incident involving an animal, Marcus the cat, who was apparently affected by a, quote, foolishness before he fell asleep and started snoring, quote, like a man.
He was affected by a foolishness.
It was first reported by international media in March of 2013. And they figure that it's probably non-communicable, as those who have studied the population haven't really suffered any symptoms. It actually went away for some time, but it reemerged in 2015. And they found that it can affect people of all age groups and genders. So in addition to excessive sleep, the disease causes vomiting, hallucination, nausea, and disorientation. And some people experience hallucinations. Some people said they had realistic and terrifying nightmares. One of the theories behind it is that that radon gas from a nearby mine could be the cause of the symptoms. Kazakh officials have given their report about the disease, stating that carbon monoxide, along with other hydrocarbons as a result of a flood around the abandoned Soviet-era uranium mine nearby, is causing the disease by spreading it through the village's air. But this has been disputed because villagers that are even closer to the mine than this place, Kalachi, have suffered no effect. It's only this random town. And the large volumes of carbon monoxide needed to cause these effects, they say, would only occur if the mines were still active, and they haven't been active since the 1990s.
So something that I'm not sure if you have this information available to you right now, but when this strikes people, are they alone, or are there other people around that do not get the sickness?
That's a great question. What I have here is that the victims fall asleep during day-to-day activities, and that they always feel sleepy regardless of how much they have slept. And it did say that people that have studied the population have haven't gotten the disease, so that's why they think it's a non-communicable.
Mhm.
But as far as if they were specifically alone, I don't know.
The reason I ask is because if it was radon, which seems weird, or carbon monoxide, or something else that's some sort of high concentration of some toxic gas, that would make sense if someone's alone in a room, or it affects a few people in there together. But it would make absolutely no sense if someone was affected and someone right next to them, the same environment, was not affected. That would seem to disprove that.
Yeah. This one is there's not a ton of information on this. It says here, actually, the world has basically lost interest. It made international news at one time, but now, pretty much everybody has forgotten about it.
I mean, yeah, especially if there's some sort of official explanation, no matter whether or not that is an accurate explanation, people would just sort of move beyond it as a solved mystery.
Somebody else said maybe on Reddit, somebody else said maybe it's a weird unknown species of mushrooms, because rural people collect mushrooms to supplement their diet. That's a theory.
I mean, that seems to make sense. If it's an isolated population, could be something in their diet. Something in their diet makes a lot more sense to me than something in the atmosphere or something airborne, because then it would affect people very specifically instead of just like large swaths of people.
So how come they don't die? It doesn't really say that people are dying from this. It basically is just saying like these people just fall asleep.
Yeah, so they get kind of like comatose, basically.
So is it like, it can't be a poison, right?
It sure can be a poison. Poisons can cause you to hallucinate, to lose consciousness. They don't have to kill you.
Fair, but you would think if somebody ingested too much or something of whatever.
Maybe maybe it's going on the mushroom hypothesis. If it's a very, very strong thing, and people are just like adding one mushroom to whatever they're having, then whoever eats that mushroom gets that sickness, but not enough to die. Or if it's something maybe that's a little less potent, less concentrated in the mushrooms, maybe you have to have a few of them before you get there. I mean, I don't think it's that strange for it not to kill people.
Okay. So actually, medical specialists still to this day argue whether it's actually a diagnosable medical illness or caused by something in the water supply, the food, or the air. And others argue maybe it's psychiatric in nature, like, you guessed it, an episode of mass hysteria.
I mean, it's an isolated village. It's totally possible that whatever is happening or has happened has been amplified by the smaller community there. It's a known quantity. It's something that happens, and so it's possible that whether consciously or unconsciously, that when people are having illnesses, then it develops into this.
It's very interesting. When I think of mass hysteria, I think of panicking, but I don't think of like, I'm going to fall asleep,
But that's not what mass hysteria means.
Well, what does mass hysteria mean? I thought it would be like, my picturing of it is like something happens and then somebody freaks out and it's like, oh God, maybe that's happening to me too. And then they develop the symptoms because they've convinced their brain. Like, remember that scene from The Office where one of them throws up and then they all start throwing up because they're getting sick because the other one's throwing up?
Yeah,
Not like that. Pretend I didn't say that.
Okay, I was going to say that's a good example because they're not panicking. They're just being influenced by what's happening to the people around them.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess.
So
it just seems like a strange thing to be influenced by.
It not when you are like, even like not suggesting that people are doing this on purpose or pretending or anything like that. Not saying that, but even if since it is a known quantity and something that happens, it's sort of an expectation. Like, if you live in that village, hey, this thing that happened to my neighbor or my uncle years ago could happen to me. And then by expecting that to happen, if you get sick or if you get a fever or even see something weird, then you feed right into that line. And I'm not saying it's happening, but it's possible, just that culture is amplifying it.
And it's kind of like the placebo effect, only with an illness.
Yeah. Like,
instead of like a cure.
Sure. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, kind of. Just the limited information that we have available to us right now that we're talking about, the most convincing thing to me has been the person saying, hey, maybe it's a mushroom. Because it just sounds, the fact that this is very acute, that this is something that happens to very specific people. How many did you say the total has been over a certain number of years?
152 victims, but there's only 680 people in the town.
Right. So it's like a quarter of the people, basically.
Yeah, about. Mm-hmm.
So, like, I mean, going back to the whole social aspect of it, if you live in a very small town and 25% of the people there have had something happen to them, that really is just, that's a part of your culture. That's a part of your society, and it's expected. But that's separate from that. Going back to my original point, maybe it is something that's in the food or in the water. It makes a lot more sense than the official airborne toxic gas kind of thing.
Having to do with the mine or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that has something to do with it, but maybe once again, it's a number of factors. Maybe every once in a while, this mine spits out some certain levels of carbon monoxide or radon or hydrocarbons. And if you have this thing in your diet, then they don't react well together. Who knows? Maybe you become more susceptible. There's a number of things you could say.
Somebody else brought up, I'll just say one more thing, then we can move on. But somebody brought up the African sleeping sickness, trypanos. I don't know why I try to pronounce stuff. The African sleeping sickness, but they're saying that's caused by parasites, by the tsetse fly, TSE flies. So it sounds like they know where that's coming from. And this is definitely fatal. I remember watching a documentary on African sleeping sickness in high school, and I passed out. Symptoms: fever, headaches, enlarged lymph nodes, joint pain, and itching. But it's caused by a parasite. Disturbance of the sleep cycle, which gives the disease its name, is an important feature. Somebody linked this on the thread that was talking about this other thing, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah,
it's just called the sleeping sickness.
Yeah, it sounds like just word association more than anything actual. I mean, despite that fact, that brings up another potential explanation. Maybe it's a parasite in that area that's doing that. Same thing as this is a parasite. I don't know. I know this is a rural village in Kazakhstan. I don't know how closely these people have been medically evaluated.
That's true. And if it was something that was transmitted, like they're saying that this African sleeping sickness is transmitted, it could possibly be sexually transmitted if these people are very stuck to their own area. They don't get out much, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
If that was a way that it was spread, or I don't know. Yeah, like a parasite's very specific to that area. Okay, so that one's solved.
Solved, got it.
It's probably something in the food.
Probably
a mushroom.
Mushroom parasite, something like that, yeah.
Okay, cool. Should we move on to the topic of outer space?
Let's go there, yeah. Let's blast off.
Love it, love it.
I can put a sound effect here for this special section. whoa, we're here in space.
Love it. Okay, so where to even start on the topic of outer space?
So you suggested outer space as a topic.
Yes, I did.
What about it made you think that, okay, this is going to be rich for discussing the mysteries of the cosmos?
Well, I think the biggest mystery is, I find it very fascinating too, and I don't know all the science behind everything, but I do find it really fascinating. The reason I suggested it is because I feel like it's one of life's greatest mysteries, right? I feel like, what is at the end of space? Is there an end of space?
Right.
And are we alone in the universe? There's a lot of different directions we can go with it. But I just find it fascinating.
So alien life, like you mentioned, that's probably one of the lowest hanging fruit here to really dig into. So let's start with that. So
okay.
Do you think that there is non-terrestrial life in the universe?
What do you mean by non-terrestrial?
It doesn't come from Earth, doesn't come from our planet.
Oh, because the term I know is extraterrestrial.
Yeah, same thing.
I never actually knew what that term meant.
Like outside of our land, of our planet.
I do, because the only reason I believe that is because I believe there has to be something else out there. I think it would be much more unlikely that in a galaxy, or galaxy is not even the biggest thing. It's
a universe.
The universe. How likely is it that we are the only ones that have, or like our planet is the only one that has life? I think there has to be something. It may be like billions and billions and billions of light years away, but there's other stars out there. There's got to be other. Yes, is the answer to the short answer.
I agree with you. I think if our assumptions on the origin of life are correct of how life could possibly form, and we're specifically talking about now, like carbon-based life, biological life forms similar to us. So that's one window that we're looking at right now, ignoring other potential versions of life that we can't even comprehend. Just life like us out there, we know through observation that there are star systems, planets similar to ours, probably have similar elemental compositions. The right ingredients are there in theory. So yeah, I agree with you. Like just law of high numbers, like how crazy would it be if it was just us? But
that's my thing. That's my main.
The foundation of that is our assumptions on the origin of life, and we don't know how life on Earth came about. So right now we're assuming
Adam and Eve, obviously.
Right. So in that case, they would just be Earth.
Yeah. No, I think my thinking behind it is just the pure, like you said, the pure fact that it's a big, big universe.
What if the origin of life is far more complicated and crazy, unlikely than we estimate? What if instead of like a 1 in a trillion chance, it was like 1 in 10 to like some big number, like 1 in gajillion billion chance? And Earth is the only one with life, just because it just happened to be in the right place, right time.
What if we're alone, you're saying?
Yeah, what if we're alone? What if life, the origin of life is far more complicated and rare than we theorize?
I don't know. I mean, it's almost scarier in a way. Like the unknown is scary enough, not knowing whether there is life or not, but that could almost be a scarier scenario because it's that I don't know. I'm not very articulate, I guess. But
I mean, no, it's a lot to think about. Like to me, if I don't think that's the case, but if it was the case, that's more of a responsibility on Earth and humanity, because if we are it, we have two ways of going. We have eventually getting to a point where we go out and spread life to other planets, or we die out on Earth.
I have questions for you. I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
We may have started too deep here with the life thing, which is totally fine because we can come back to it. But yeah, to go on with like life on other planets for us, I think in like 100 years or something, literally, it's going to be like Boeing and Airbus and major airlines like United and all that. We're going to have those for space. And it's going to be Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. And literally people are going to be booking vacations to Mars. They'll be like, I'm going to Mars for the week. And I'll like just for vacation. I could totally see that happening. Is that crazy?
Why?
Because we're already doing this. We're already starting to explore space. I mean, we've been exploring space. We've been to the moon. I'm sure like 100 years before anyone went to space, people were thinking, take it like this. In the 1800s, people had to literally sail across the ocean. You'd get to the other side of the world in like 3 months. And now we can go to the other side of the world in like a day.
I agree that it is possible 100 years from now. Like if you look 100 years in the past at 1921, where like airplanes were just like sort of were very rudimentary. Like it's totally possible, but let me counter with this. Why did we as like, we as a species, not even talking about the US, which was the first one to the moon, why did we as a species accelerate so fast from flight to space travel and then to the moon?
What do you mean?
Like why?
Why did we want to do that?
It's not something that happens in a vacuum, but just decisions are made and projects are made. Like why?
Well, I think for research purposes.
No, I disagree.
You know the answer? Or you do know the answer? Or you have an opinion? Or you're asking my opinion?
I mean, it's a philosophical question, but it's not like, I'm not trying to ask like philosophical, like why, what is the meaning? I'm asking like literally why were the decisions made? And
maybe to compete with other countries that were trying to do the same thing.
Exactly. That's exactly my point. The Cold War. There's a reason why the US and the USSR accelerated space travel so much and the US got to the moon. And if that clip had kept going, that emphasis on space travel and colonization, by now we probably would have a colony on the moon. We got there in the 60s. We stood on it. We came back. There have been so few trips back there because there is no reason to go back. And the people with money, the people making the decisions, don't have that as a priority. So my argument to Mars vacations in 100 years is that could happen, but it's not going to happen unless powerful people decide that that's a priority for whatever reason.
But don't you think those powerful people are already focusing on space? I mean, you've seen Elon Musk with his creations, and we just saw Jeff Bezos go up. I mean,
number one, they're not his creations. And I know that's not what you meant by that, but I will
No, I know he didn't. I mean, there's engineers and there's all sorts of people. He's just the person that, you know what I meant.
He's he has billions of ill-gotten wealth that he uses for vanity projects.
What do you mean by ill-gotten wealth?
Built off of the not properly, not properly compensated workers.
You don't like Elon Musk, do you?
No. Do you know where he comes from?
He's kind of weird.
Do you know his family history?
He comes from South Africa.
Well, his family, he's not a self-made person. He comes from wealth, and he comes from his family got the wealth through colonial, taking advantage just of the population of blood gems and diamond mines and stuff like that. That's
I actually didn't know that.
And he is a completely arrogant, self-absorbed person. Your example of why we are headed in that direction, like the whole Bezos, Musk, other people like space projects is the perfect evidence that it's not going in that direction, because their point is just for very focused, self-aggrandizing commercial flight. It's just the experience. Their focus is not on developing, trotting new territory, developing things to actually focus on life on other planets or acceleration or propulsion technologies to get us there. New technologies to actually maybe not terraform, but allow us to live on the moon or Mars or other planets. Their focus has been basically retreading the same thing that the U.S. was able to do as a country and the USSR was able to do in the 60s and 70s. And they haven't even matched that. They just spend it. All their focus is on these really glorified spacewalks that are just to sell tickets to other rich people.
So, wow. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So you basically think it's a big, like, look what I can do.
Oh, absolutely. Like as much as Musk talks about, oh, we're going to Mars, we're going to do this. There has been no evidence that that is the end goal, just beyond just a pipe dream. He just likes the idea of space. And so Tesla has made really great engineering advances. And the engineers at Tesla, I think, are very talented, very insightful. And the promotion of electric cars as there's good and bad side to everything, I think is a great direction for it. But the whole space aspect, I don't think has legs, because the only, to bring it back to the whole point of why it's happening, I think the only way that we would have functioning like people living, not even talking about like vacation places, but people living and researching and working on Mars in 100 years, if it's made a priority by countries or equally wealthy, powerful corporations to say, like, it's very important that we have people living on there. And right now, no one has made that a priority.
Well, I have a question. If that were going to be possible, how would people breathe up there?
Well, you'd have to bring the atmosphere with you, theoretically.
So how does that, would you have to make a fake atmosphere, or would you just everyone have an oxygen tank that they're breathing in?
In theory, like if we're talking about colonizing Mars,
yeah,
then it would be steps. The people that first arrived there would bring their own atmosphere and tanks and ships and probably colony units. And in order to get all the way from the planet as is right now with minimal atmosphere that's not breathable to humans all the way to something Earth-like would take generations of terraforming.
How? You can actually make that, you can actually manufacture that?
I mean, if you look at the Earth's history, the Earth used to have a much different atmosphere according to like the fossil record than it does right now. And biologists and geologists believe that it's due to just propagation of life on Earth.
Really?
Carbon is captured by plants. Oxygen, molecular oxygen is released into the atmosphere by plants. And as plants propagated across the Earth, then that changed the atmosphere, and that allowed other life to evolve and survive, like us. So if we were trying to mimic something like that on Mars, we'd have to start with microorganisms and then to macroorganisms and small plants and stuff like that, eventually get to a point where that could happen. And what's necessary for all of that is water. So number one, we have to see how much water is on Mars and if we need to add more of it.
Is there water on Mars?
There's ice caps, and there's lots of evidence of there possibly had been running water on Mars at some point in the distant past. So
it's cold over there?
It's a little colder than Earth, but where the ice caps are at the poles of the planet, yeah, it's pretty cold.
Is it colder than Chicago in the winter?
I would say at some points it's not. But I don't know.
Interesting. I was just looking up Mars just to see if I could find the answer to that. There's so much information out there. One of the biggest mysteries I have had about space, I asked this in my 5th grade class when we were talking about space. Like, you know how you've got the sun right?
Yes.
This is the sun.
Yes. That's the
And
sun.
then you have Venus.
She's holding her listeners at home. She's holding her hands to form a ball, and now
Yes.
she's forming a ball for Venus.
Yes. So there's the sun, then Venus, then Mercury.
No, Mercury comes before Venus.
Fine. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, etc.
Yes.
My question is, that's all here, right? What's down?
Well, what you're
Below.
describing is the elliptical plane of the planets orbiting the sun, right?
Correct. And that's the question I asked in 5th grade. I asked what's below?
Some of if we're just talking about like the big planets, like the proper planets, the biggest objects in the solar system, most of them are on a very similar axis around the sun.
We're talking about our galaxy, right?
Our solar system.
And our solar system is within the galaxy, right?
Yes. The galaxy is
bigger
another,
than, okay.
Yeah, the Milky Way galaxy, which our solar system is in, is unfathomably bigger than that.
Got
and
it.
Has, millions and billions of different stars.
Okay. Sorry.
And then
Go
other
ahead.
galaxies outside of that. But yeah, just talking about our solar system, I think it's a good question. But the question, I think it has an easy answer, but it leads to another question. The easy answer is what's above and below that if you assume that the Earth and other orbits are in one plane, and above and below that is generally space or other small orbiting things. And then the question is, why is it all in one plane, basically like that?
Yeah, I guess that would be the question.
And then what, as far as I understand it, how most astronomers would answer that question is that it ties to the formation of a star. Because as far as we understand it, as stars form, they are basically, as matter condenses together, and eventually it reaches a like stellar matter, like the remnants of explosions or the remnants of the Big Bang, or just stellar matter that's out there. Basically, just a lot of hydrogen. When it combines, it falls in itself due to gravity, then it can reach a point of ignition, and a star is formed. But as it's doing that, as a star is forming, there is a spiraling shape of the matter coming in on itself. And also there are possible, whether it's just a nebula or whether it's the remains of a different explosion out there. And as
what's nebula? Can you explain that? Because maybe some of the viewers don't know what nebula is.
I mean, just like big, like impossibly to conceive of large patches of stellar gas.
Okay, got it.
That usually have some stars inside it too. But as opposed to like blank space, it has just a lot of matter in there.
Taylor Swift, Blank Space.
Yeah.
You know the song, right?
I don't know.
But you didn't get the reference then?
But
she has a song called Blank Space.
I assumed as much, yeah.
Okay.
It's good.
Sorry. Okay, so I guess one of the biggest mysteries of space is obviously, so does it just go on forever? And if it doesn't, what's at the end of it?
Well, yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
Yeah. So what do you think? Or is that too much?
I mean, I really have no idea. I could make up anything, but I don't think we have the right evidence to answer that question in any meaningful way. There are people that theorize that it goes off infinitely forever and it's just potential in all directions. And some people think that it actually sort of loops back in on itself in some weird geometrical way. But it's hard for me to imagine that there's just a hard and fast boundary.
Yeah, and then what happens what's after the boundary? You know what I'm saying?
So, but I mean, space is just reality as we perceive it in 3 dimensions. So who knows what's outside of that?
Do you know if there's been attempts that have been made to find out what's beyond? Like, could we like ship a rocket to just keep going and going and going and going and going and like have a camera on it so we could watch 20 years from now and see where it's at? But or would it be something like no one would be able to know in our lifetime?
Well, the issue with that is that if we're just talking about sending out something to gather sensory data or look, our propulsion systems right now are extremely limited. And even if we were able to advance our propulsion systems to
That's like propelling?
Yeah, how far we can shoot things and how fast. Okay. Even if we can advance that to the point of theoretical maximum of physics as we know it, there still is like the speed limit of the speed of light, where as physics as we understand it right now, matter cannot possibly go faster than the speed of light, and nothing can go faster than the speed of light. And even if we sent out something at the speed of light away from the Earth, it would not reach the edge of the universe, because the universe is expanding out at the speed of light.
Oh, the universe is expanding?
Oh yeah, that's probably a point we should touch on. Theoretically, the universe is expanding.
What, theoretically? I thought you didn't know what happened at the end of the universe. Now you're telling me it's expanding.
Well, we know that the stuff inside of it is expanding. That's nothing to say about the edge of the universe. We just know, according to our observations of other stellar bodies, is that it appears, ever since we've been looking at them, that everything has been moving away from everything else.
What is that? Like what? Like our solar system's been moving away from other things?
Our galaxy has been moving away from other galaxies. And
how
those
do we know
galaxies
that?
have been moving away from each other by looking at the most basic piece of evidence is the shift in light. Because if you're obviously how we're looking at things is just light, looking through a telescope, and in even like other spectrum outside of our visible spectrum, that's still forms of light, forms of electromagnetic radiation. That's how we are visualizing stellar bodies out there outside of us. We can tell based on how the light shifts if it's moving towards us or away from us. And so something that has been observed a long time ago is that it appears that everything is moving away from us, which would mean that everything is expanding out, which would fit the model of a Big Bang explosion that happens from a single point that explodes outward and then continues to explode outward as stars form and solar systems form and stuff like that. So we're still in the middle of the explosion.
So what happened before there was the Big Bang?
Yeah, nobody knows. And nobody knows if the Big Bang is real or not. It's just a theory.
Do you believe it is real?
I mean, I think it's the most likely thing, because we don't have a lot of evidence, but most of the evidence we have right now is satisfied by that theory. So I'm comfortable operating on.
And that's basically the theory that the universe exploded out of a what?
That all the matter and energy that exists in the universe right now was at some point in a singularity, like just one impossibly small point of space before space even existed, and then it exploded outward into all of space.
It's such an interesting concept, isn't it? It's just like, what's out there? You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah. It's crazy because like there's like the alien question, like there's two separate questions. One is like, what's out there? And the other one is, where did it all come from and where's it going?
Yes, that one I think is my biggest one, is where did it come from and where's it going?
Yeah. But to get into like we went through the whole expansion tangent to answer your question about like why we can't look at the edge of the universe. The edge of the universe is theoretically hurtling away from us at the speed of light constantly. So there's no way we could possibly reach the end of it.
I see. So I don't know. It's fascinating. I wonder if there's ever going to be a way. So light years are another thing that interests me.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I'm moving off the territory of mystery, but it's just interesting. So like, a light year is the distance that light travels in a year.
Yeah.
How far is a light year?
I think light travels different distances. It has different speeds depending on the medium that it's going through. So a light year is normally measured in light moving through a vacuum of space. If I remember correctly, that would be just under 6 trillion miles.
Oh,
So it's really
is that all?
Far.
6 trillion. So light travels 6 trillion miles in 1 year.
Yes, if it's moving through a vacuum.
So if I see, now you lost me. If I'm in the woods and I turn on a flashlight, is that traveling at 6 trillion miles an hour?
It's going through air, so it's slightly slower than that, but the difference is you're not going to be able to perceive the difference.
But the vacuum you're referring to is just because of the lack of oxygen?
The lack of anything, the lack of matter.
Okay. Yeah, so when you get into space, there's nothing. There's in the air. It's not even air, it's just space.
Yeah, that's why it's called the vacuum of space. When you leave the Earth's atmosphere, there is it's possible there are small little molecules of things, but for all intents and purposes, it is completely devoid of matter.
Okay.
Especially if we're talking about deep space away from solar systems and galaxies, as far as we know.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. That's really cool. I really could ask a billion questions, but I feel like a lot of the questions I have are answered by science already, and we've discussed already what is the biggest mystery in terms of space? Are there any others that are interesting to you besides what we mentioned, the existence of life elsewhere, or the what was the other one we were just talking about? Yeah, where it came from, all that.
Where it came from. I think at least the most mysterious aspect that fits closest to your podcast, style would be, number one, if life exists on other planets. Number two, if life on other planets has visited Earth at any time in the past.
Do you believe that life has visited here from outer space? Because there's been obviously, countless stories of abductions and sightings. What's your whole take on that?
I think that it's possible, but unlikely. I don't think there's enough evidence to suggest that it actually has happened. But totally, it could have. I don't know.
So what do you make of do you think the historical sort of things that have happened, do you think what do you think? If I were to give you an example of something that was like a sighting, what would you be able to respond and tell me what you think it was? Or do you think it's people making stuff up? Because there was this one I saw in Unsolved Mysteries, and I don't have the name of it right now, but it was these people that were driving down the road and they saw this huge disc in the sky, and they got out of the car to look at what it was because it was hovering over the road, and it was really bright, and it was blinding them, and they actually had burns on their skin, and something about they had to go to the doctor because they got sick from it or something, radiation poisoning, or anyway, long story short, I guess my question to you is, what do you think the reason behind all of the UFO sightings / stories that people have told in the past? Do you think that's all made up, or people misperceived what they saw?
I think there are as many explanations as there are stories. I think some of those people undoubtedly made it up. I'm not saying the majority of them, but I'm saying certainly some of them did. And quite a few of them, I'm sure, actually believe that they experienced something. but I think there are just so many, like it's just, there's so many possible explanations for what could happen that don't include aliens, that I have trouble like saying like, okay, this is evidence of aliens. Like whether there's some weird atmospheric phenomena, there's they saw a plane or some aircraft they couldn't explain, or they were hallucinating, or any number of other things.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that probably for people who have experienced stuff like that, I think I'm sure they're tired of hearing that because they believe that. But I'm just saying, as a third party, there's just no evidence.
Yeah.
So, it's possible, but I would need something solid to convince me that it was likely.
Where do you think the modern day depiction of aliens, the like green, big-eyed creatures that we see, like when aliens are depicted, where do you think that came from?
Well,
I'm sure I could look it up.
Yeah. It's probably just from like science fiction in like the earlier 20th century, and people who believe they were abducted by aliens, and they usually, when they describe it, usually it's elongated humanoid forms, which I think is another piece of evidence that it didn't really happen, because I think it's unlikely that elongated humans are what these aliens are shaped like. And it's much more likely that people had night terrors or hallucinations. But I think that's the origin of the green or gray, big-eyed aliens that we think of.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier about Jeff Bezos. You said like you had your opinion on it. We already kind of went over that, but did you have anything else you wanted to say about that?
About Jeff Bezos?
The fact that he went to space, and I think at the beginning we were talking about it, and you said I have an opinion on that.
Oh, well, I think I've already made that opinion clear. I think it was a waste of resources. I doubt. It depends, like where it's going affects how I would feel about it. If this directly leads to new advances in propulsion technology, habitation technology, other things that would be able to advance us off the planet and colonize other things, I think it would be worth it and great. I don't think it's headed in that direction. And because of that, I think it is a purposeless use of resources for self-aggrandizing and just sort of advertising a new thing that wealthy people can waste money on.
Yeah. Yeah, I was watching it, and I just find it fascinating to watch it. Like I've watched a few other rocket launches. I just think it's cool to watch it, and the stats that they have that says how fast it's going and the altitude, and like I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's undoubtedly cool, and that's why he wants to do it, and other people want to do it. And I know that there have been some transportation and propulsion advances with like SpaceX and other similar programs, but I don't think it's. I don't
Is
think
that
it's
Elon's?
Yeah, the
SpaceX
Elon Musk one. Yeah, okay. There have been increases in advances in technology, but I don't think it's headed anywhere useful. Okay. I'd be happy to be proven wrong about that.
If you were given the opportunity to go to space, would you?
I mean, I'd have
let's say you were chosen to go on Bezos or Elon Musk's flights.
I'd have trouble saying no to that, and that may sound contradictory and what's the word?
No, hypocritical.
Hypocritical, but it's the reason that these rich people want to do it so much, and the reason that there are so many wealthy people lining up to buy tickets is because it's such an astounding opportunity for any one person to do.
Right.
So if I was given the opportunity, I'd have trouble saying no. But I believe on the face of it, like objectively, that it's not a super useful thing.
But you would do it just to see it? You wouldn't be nervous?
Oh, of course I'd be nervous, but I mean, it's just like if you have an opportunity like that.
I wouldn't do it.
Because the risks involved?
Yeah. And
Well,
I can't stand airline turbulence, so there's no way I'm going up on a spaceship.
I have an issue with that. So this almost kind of tangentially leads to what the next topic of our next episode should be about, and
Yes.
that is life after death.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, definitely. I would do it. But yeah, I looked this up. This is what's his face? Jeff Bezos. Mission duration, 10 minutes and 18 seconds.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
What was really gained? What was advanced?
That's what I was saying. I'm like, what's the point of this? Other than testing the science that it can be done, I guess.
Testing the science can be done. We've gone further before this, because the whole point is they're not trying to go as far as they can. They're not trying to go to a certain distance, better, more efficiently, or something that has been done before. They're trying to proof of concept, little what's the word? Vanity space flights that they can sell. Yeah. That's all it is a proof of concept for that.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. We didn't talk about everything that we could for space, but there's just so many directions you could go. So I don't know. Do we want to call it?
I think we touched on important things. It's just such a infinite topic. Space is. So.
It is. I see what you did there.
There aren't a lot of real solid mysteries or things that we can really grapple.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. It's a joy, because you're very, very articulate and intelligent, and it's been great hearing your theories on these things.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate you you offering me the opportunity. I enjoy listening to your podcast, so I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thank you for listening, by the way. I really appreciate that. And yeah, you'll definitely be invited back, because awesome. We have 2 more ideas. So
great.
That's all for this episode of 1 minute and 43 seconds, a true Unsolved Mysteries podcast. As usual, thank you for listening, and please find us on Instagram at 143mysteries or 143mysteries.com. See you next time. This podcast has been approved by Skipper the Cat. Right, Skippy?